couple of years ago, I stopped asking myself, how do I protect what I have? And I started asking a different question. What can I actually control? When you can't control the world around you, the only thing left to build is the life that you can control. So what can I control? I've been trying to answer that question ever since, and it completely changed the way that I think about retirement, living abroad, and what real security actually means. You see, when I retired early and moved to the Czech Republic, I honestly thought that I'd reached the finish line. I'd done it. I had the freedom that I'd worked so hard for. But over the last 2 years, I realized something. That wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a completely different chapter. I've done the new arrival videos, the 10 things about the Czech Republic videos, and all the newbie topics, and all of the practical advice that comes with starting over in a new country. But something else has been changing too. Living abroad has changed the way that I think about security. Back when I was working, security meant one reliable paycheck. Today, it means something completely different. It means not depending on one source of income, one economy, one investment, or one plan. Life changes, markets change, exchange rates change, governments change. And when you live internationally, you become much more aware of how quickly circumstances can shift in or out of your favor. And that's why I've started creating again. This time, I'm building planning tools. This is one of the first comparison charts that I ever made. This decision matrix took me months. This workbook started as a few pages, and I'm writing screenplays and short stories again. This screenplay sat in a drawer for years before I picked it up again. Returning to the things that brought me joy. One thing surprised me. After I retired, I assumed I'd stop creating. Instead, I started creating more than I ever had while I was working. Not because someone assigned me a project, because I had finally had the freedom to build the things that I wanted to build. Some of those things might earn money. Some probably won't, but that's almost beside the point. Creating has become part of how I make sense of this new chapter of my life. When I lived in California, I didn't think much about where my money came from. Everything was familiar. The rules were familiar. The currency was familiar. If something changed, I was living in the middle of it. Moving abroad changed that overnight. Suddenly I was earning money from one country, living in another, buying property in another currency, and watching major decisions being made thousands of miles away that could still affect my future. That was a completely different feeling, not necessarily worse, just different. For the first time, I realized that financial security isn't just about how much you have. It's also about how much control you have over the things that affect it. People ask me if I think these workbooks will succeed. The honest answer, I have no idea. I don't know if anyone will buy them. I don't know if YouTube will ever become meaningful income. I don't know if writing will. I don't know if any of these ideas will work. But here's what I do know. Doing nothing guarantees that nothing changes. Building something gives me a chance. When I first moved here, I didn't know if I'd like living in the Czech Republic. I tried. And when I bought an apartment, I didn't know if it was the right decision. I tried. Starting over has taught me one thing. Most of the important decisions in my life, they happened before I knew how they would turn out. And I'm also creating resources that I wish that I had had before I moved abroad. Maybe they'll help someone else. Maybe it'll make their transition a little smoother. And yes, I'm attempting to build multiple streams of income. Not because I'm chasing more money, and not because I need another job. When I realized that I couldn't control exchange rates or elections or government policy or the economy, I stopped asking myself, how do I protect what I have? And that's when I started asking, like I said before, what can I actually control? And that question changed everything. Because every time I ran into a problem while I was planning my move abroad, I built something, a spreadsheet, a checklist, a comparison chart, a decision matrix, not because I enjoyed making spreadsheets, because each one solved a problem that I couldn't find an answer to anywhere else. And eventually I looked at this growing collection of files and I realized I wasn't just organizing information anymore. I was quietly building a library of solutions. So I cleaned them up, and I added everything that I'd ever learned over the last few years, and I turned them into resources that someone else could actually use. And that's one of the income streams that I'm building, not because I expect one workbook to change my life, but because creating something useful is the one thing that I can control. I'm doing it because I'm trying to build a life that's resilient, a life with options, a life that isn't dependent on any one thing working perfectly. So many of us, we go to bed at night wondering why, when we've done everything right, everything they told us growing up that we needed to do, we did. But there's a particular kind of frustration reserved for people who did everything correctly, only to discover at the end of the bargain that you kept that they may not keep their end of the bargain. And I watched from here while the conversation started changing. Rules I had planned around, promises the system made to me, the assumptions I had built on, suddenly were less certain than they were. That's a strange feeling when you're living abroad, because you've already managed a life across 2 countries, 2 currencies, 2 sets of rules, and when one of those sets of rules starts shifting, you feel it differently here than you would at home. There's a distance to it, a helplessness that's hard to describe. The floor might move, and you're standing very far away from it. When you move abroad, you learn very quickly that your financial life doesn't simplify, it doubles. I have responsibilities in the United States. I have responsibilities here. The exchange rate has an opinion about all of that, and it doesn't ask me first. And I'm not going to tell you that I have this all figured out. I don't. So what else am I doing? I'm going back to what my grandmother taught me. I'm diversifying what little portfolio I have: real estate, gold, silver, international stocks, and cash, and getting rid of any remaining debt. I've always been into the gold and silver, so that part's not new for me. And I don't know how any of this resolves. Nobody does, and that's the point. What I do know is that I'd rather be building something that I control than waiting to find out. If you're in a similar situation, retired, abroad, or just trying to build a little more flexibility into your life, I'll keep you posted on how this goes.
The old houses of Europe have witnessed an astonishing number of certainties come and go. Empires, kings, republics, currencies, governments. Every generation was convinced the world had changed forever. Most of them were right.